Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Special Education News and Noteworthy, the podcast where we break down the news and noteworthy happenings in special education across the United States and talk about what they mean for students, families, educators, and advocates. I'm Paige Fitzgerald.
And I'm Kate McGaldy.
And before we get started, if you're enjoying the podcast, we'd love for you to take a moment to follow the show on Spotify. Following the podcast helps more families find us and ensures you never miss a new episode.
So this week we're discussing growing bipartisan opposition to moving special education oversight out of the Department of Education, rising special education compliance violations, a lawsuit involving special education services and reimbursement, confusing around special education teacher pay incentives, and a school district that has paid more than $2 million to settle special education disputes. Let's jump right in.
Our first story comes from USA Today. Just days after the Trump administration announced plans to move federal special education oversight from the Department of Education to the Department of Health and Human Services, lawmakers from both parties are expressing concerns. Senator Bill Cassidy, the Republican chairman of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, stated that he opposes moving the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, often called OSERS, to HHS. Cassidy has committed to holding a committee vote in July on legislation that would block the transfer. The administration maintains that students' rights and services would not be affected by the move. However, many disability advocacy organizations, parent groups, and special education attorneys have voiced concerns that separating special education oversight from the Department of Education could create confusion for families and weaken accountability systems. With a Senate vote potentially on the horizon, this issue continues to evolve and remains one of the most closely watched developments in special education policy right now.
So, I mean, just from my perspective, what I think makes this story most interesting, I mean, it's on every single news channel and then every single news article that I've read, it's significant that there's concerns not just on one side, not just from a disability advocate side or from one political party. We're really seeing questions raised from both sides of the aisle. So I feel like, it is something that we have to look closely at and to figure out, like, what is the intention? Is it actually going to improve special education services? I'm not too sure about it myself.
Well, and there's no congressional approval for this, right? We have those safeguards in it for a reason. And to try to go around congressional approval probably means that they didn't think that they would get congressional approval. So they're just trying to strong arm it and do it.
Yep.
You're inviting voices to the table and then you're not listening to what those voices are saying. Secretary McMahon had numerous roundtables with advocates and parents and all of these stakeholders in special education, and said that she was listening to what they were saying, but she was listening to the fact that there are problems in special education, but she wasn't really listening, it seems, to the solutions that were being proposed. Because from what we're hearing, it seems like a lot of the people that were at those meetings are saying that is not what we proposed. That is not what we wanted to happen. So there's a lot of media attention on this, and it is well deserved media attention because this is a big deal and the consequences could be bigger than big. So,
Yeah.
yeah, keep an eye on this, and I'm sure we'll have stuff next week to continue to.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to say one more thing. Parents, families already have a difficult time navigating the special education system, and to have like this like uncertainty or like these speculations and what they're seeing on the news every day, I mean, it's just giving them more angst until we have some more closure and some real hard evidence as to what it actually is going to do for the special education community. All right. Our second story comes from Georgia, where special education compliance violations have nearly tripled over the past several years. According to data from the Georgia Department of Education, the number of districts found out of compliance with special education law increased from 68 cases in 2021 to 190 cases in 2025. The article highlights one case involving a student with autism who received repeated suspensions. After investigating a complaint filed by the student's family, the state determined that the district had not properly considered whether the student's behavior was related to his disability and found that the district was out of compliance with special education law. As part of the corrective action, the district was required to review discipline procedures and provide additional staff training. The story raises important questions about how schools handle discipline involving students with disabilities and the importance of ensuring that disability related behaviors are properly understood and addressed. It's
Yeah,
a big one.
Yeah, and this is one that we're actually addressing a little more deeply in the newsletter this week. Our special education insights is going to be about manifestation determination because
Mhm.
this is a particular area where most parents have a lot of confusion around it because it's not something that comes up very often. And when it does come up, especially with behaviors, sometimes they're not really told and explained what their rights are, what their child's rights are when they have a disability and they are having problematic behaviors or aggressive behaviors within the school. Some schools don't go to manifestation determination. It's up to a parent to say, "No, we need an MDR, manifestation determination review." So that's in our newsletter this week, but it's just one of those things where, the school was saying that they were going by the code of conduct and they were trying to
Mhm.
say that, the aggressive behavior, according to the story, was, being handled with how they would typically handle aggressive behavior and noncompliance and all of those things. And the parents rightfully fought back against that. They had also, I believe, they tried to say, they said that the school was not following the IEP, which was their belief. I believe that
Yeah.
that was the state board of education found that the school was following
Yes,
the
they
IEP,
were in
but a
compliance.
state complaint found that they were not, following the behavior protocol for a child with a disability. So, and then of course the district let out a statement saying that, they weren't doing anything wrong, which surprise, surprise, of course, I don't know any school or company that usually says, "You got us."
You're right,
Like, "Oh,
100%.
we
But
weren't."
I think, the increase across the board, I think, like, the increase does not necessarily mean that this school does not care and, that they did things intentionally. I think some of this might even mean that, like, the reflection of, like, the increase in special education student needs, staffing concerns, lack of training surrounding, how like, the protocol of how to treat a child with special education needs, specifically around behavior, understanding that behavior needs to be examined, like, as a whole support need versus, like, the actual like, what actually is what am I trying to say? Like, instead of treating something as a
Like a
discipline, like,
holistic
looking at
view.
the whole.
Yeah,
What's
holistic.
that?
Holistic?
Like a holistic review, exactly. So, I think training surrounding that, like, why is a child actually acting out like that? There might be something, surrounding that child's needs that, is making he or she act that certain way. So I think more training is necessary in, with increasingly complex special education needs. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and just think of just teacher turnover in general, right? I mean, even
Yeah.
outside special education teachers, teacher turnover, there
Yeah.
needs to be constant training on behavior intervention
Sure.
and those social emotional supports because you're getting new teachers in every year and dealing with behaviors, managing behaviors correctly and helping children find replacement behaviors that are more effective in getting their needs met. It takes a lot of learning and a lot of self-regulation too to help a child that's dysregulated. So um
Sure.
so so that district ended up, they have to now show that they are doing trainings for staff and they have to prove that and send all that in. So hopefully it'll improve how things are. All right.
Yeah.
So our third story comes from Massachusetts. A family has filed a lawsuit against the public schools of Brookline, alleging that the district failed to uphold the terms of a settlement agreement related to their child's special education services. According to the lawsuit, the family claims the district missed required payments, made others late, and failed to provide an individualized education program, aka an IEP, for their child. The family alleges that delays in reimbursement force them to pay for educational services out of pocket and, at times, reduce services that their child received. The district has not yet formally responded to the lawsuit, and the allegations have not been proven in court. This story serves as a reminder that developing a plan or reaching an agreement is only part of the process. Families and districts alike must ensure that services, supports, and commitments are consistently implemented.
I don't know. Some families cannot afford thousands of dollars waiting for the districts to reimburse them. And I can only imagine, just like the burden that these families were feeling at that time and just for their child to receive appropriate services. Never mind that the fact that during that time, or because they were late in payment, or because they were missing appointments, whatever, that the child was probably losing valuable instructional time. So, yeah, this one's a shame.
Yeah. And it makes me think of we had a client a couple of years back where we went to look at some autism focused programs with them. And I remember asking the person that was giving us the tour, like, oh, well, how much, is the tuition? And this was a school where parents really weren't privately placing on their own. It was district reimbursed. And I think it was something like 90,000 a year.
No, I think it was like I was gonna say close to
Yeah,
$100,000, and we
it
were
was
both
like
like,
they were like baseline, 90,000 baseline for this program. I was like, "Whew." I was like, "Okay, well,
yeah,
that makes sense of why parents aren't just privately placing at their own expense." And I think of it I don't know how much this program was, of course, because they don't mention that in the story, but I just think of missing payments for that and having to have the parents paid out of pocket, or pay something out of pockets. You're right, I think most parents couldn't do that. Right? Like, that's
no,
so I mean, it sounds like that school, even though they were making late payments with the district, thank goodness that the child was still able to be enrolled there because then they would have had a bigger problem. But,
sure,
I mean, as we know, week after week, funding is a mess,
yep,
but compliance still needs to happen, right? If students are outplaced by the district, they still need to be able to go to their outplacement because it was deemed necessary. All right.
yeah. All right, our fourth story focuses on special education staffing and teacher retention. Earlier this year, Mississippi lawmakers approved a $2,000 raise for all teachers, along with an additional $2,000 supplement intended for special education teachers. The problem, state officials are still trying to determine exactly which educators will qualify. The law's language has created confusion about whether the supplement applies only to self contained special education teachers or whether inclusion teachers and other special education personnel should also be eligible. And as a result, districts are delaying the supplemental payments while awaiting clarification from lawmakers. The story highlights a challenge that many states continue to face, which is attracting and retaining, like we talked about in the last story, two stories ago, qualified special education professionals while clearly defining the roles and responsibilities that exist within special education programs. Um,
I mean, I think this is a great incentive program.
yeah,
But I mean, clearly, like, hindsight is 2020. Who knows when they were developing this, right? You're developing it and were they maybe having those conversations with people that are actually in the schools and in the district and thinking about, okay, special education teachers are not just self-contained classrooms. There are also ones that do integrated co-taught classrooms. There are also ones that do like resource and push-in. So it just seems like that was really overlooked. So if they
sure.
would have had more conversations about what will qualify, because right now we're hearing them saying, well, I think we meant just like if they're in the class, AKA self-contained. But that was a
Yeah,
misunderstanding. And so now it's to see, okay, we're going to stay with our original definition that we didn't truly define, but this is what was in our head of a self-contained, or are we now going to expand it? Because guess what? Integrated co-taught teaching, that's still special education. It is
yeah.
special education. You have children with IEPs there. If I was in charge of the funds, I would have included them as well. I am not. And Budget
But
Mike is probably happy that I'm not. For all of you
But,
guys.
I mean, you think about us, getting our degrees in special education, and there was a time that I was a resource teacher, there was a time that I was an inclusion teacher, there was a time, like, if you're really trying to be nitty-gritty here, like, every related service provider, resource room, transition specialist, everyone plays such a crucial role in special education. But it just goes back to what we know and we hear over and over again in special education. You're gonna start seeing it on billboards on our local interstate soon that recruitment and retention challenges exist across special education, and it's really difficult. There's gonna be job postings up the wazoo
Oh, yeah.
every single summer because they're just in such dire need
Mhm.
because the retention of keeping special education teachers, maybe for reasons like this, just are not there. So,
Yeah. I just laughed
yeah.
at like the phone calls that were coming in of like, "So you meant all of them, right?" And they're like, "What? There's more than what? What do you
Just
mean?
special ed? What
Special
does that
education
mean?
teachers aren't just in like a special education classroom?"
No, yeah,
Why? All right. Well, that's why it's good to get a thorough understanding of things before you put promises together, but hopefully it'll get cleared up. And I mean, because now that it's a well-known thing too, right? Teachers are going to be waiting and expecting and going to see, okay, well, so are you now valuing this kind of special education teaching more than this one if I don't get that extra 2,000? So I
right.
think we've kind of opened up a can of worms. So
You might see a lot of people trying to move to Mississippi too, just saying.
You never know. All
You
right.
never know.
All right. Our final story this week comes from North Carolina. A review by the News and Observer found that Wake County Public Schools has approved more than $2.2 million in special education settlements since January 2025, resolving 20 complaints brought by families of students with disabilities. One of the featured cases involved an 8-year-old student with significant medical needs. After the district attempted to transfer him to an alternative school, the family challenged the decision through the legal system. An administrative law judge ultimately ruled in favor of the family, questioning the district's characterization of the student as a danger to others. The case later resulted in a settlement that included funding for private school placement and additional educational services. The story highlights the financial and emotional costs that can arise when disagreements between families and school districts escalate into formal disputes, while also underscoring the importance of understanding your procedural safeguards and advocacy options.
Dollar amount may sound super shocking, but I think the more important question is what led the families and districts to reach that point? The goal, the best outcome in all these areas is for things to get resolved early, resolved quickly so the child gets the services that they need and the money is going to go back to the children and into the system. But we know that that's not always the case.
Yeah, and we also just heard from 2 stories ago that private placement is expensive because of how specialized it typically is. If a
Hmm.
student's needs can't be met in a public school setting, then sometimes outplacement is the right choice for that student. And for this story in particular, I mean, it's really just shameful. The parents are sharing that once they had decided that they didn't feel like this child belonged in that placement, that they would have I think they had said something like they had put in a behavior log. He had like over 300 behavior incidents in 30
Hmm.
minutes. And then
Yeah.
when somebody actually reviewed it during the case, they were like, "You were really just taking one behavior incident of 30 minutes and like acting as if it were these things." So everything that he did within this one behavioral incident, they chose to log as an insane amount of behaviors,
Hmm.
which is just it's shameful. And then claiming that damaging property, that he was damaging and destroying property, and then it said in the news story that it was him shredding the paper off of crayons.
Yeah. Yeah.
And another one was what was the other one? It was like, oh, that he was trying to kick at staff, but it was him laying on the floor and kicking like bicycling his feet in the air. And
Yeah.
mind you that
Yeah.
this is a child whose stature is smaller than most of his, same age peers because of his medical conditions. And so
Hmm.
they had just really kind of had a bee in their bonnet, about
Yeah.
getting this
They
child.
had a mark on him. They had a mark on him for
Yeah,
sure. They
and this
they
is
they tagged them.
yeah, and this is why it's so important for parents to know their rights, right? Knowing that
Sure.
what your procedural safeguard rights are and knowing that you need to be documenting everything yourself as well. Because
Yeah.
if, it's it's what do they say? Like what when like one institution gets to investigate themselves and you're like, surprise, surprise, we made the right choice. So, parents need to know when they can trust the judgment of the school and when they have to get outside judgment on it and be like, you know what, something's not sitting right with me. The things that they are saying are not the things that I am seeing. And I need to get
Yeah.
support, whether that is an advocate, whether that is an attorney, filing a complaint. So, I mean, good for these parents for doing that, and not just the parents in these stories, all of the other parents that went
Yeah.
along the same
$2
track to
million dollars worth.
yeah, to say, you know what, something's not right, and maybe they did try to resolve it within their local school first, and they weren't heard, or they were, gaslit, or who knows what it who knows what it was. But I'm happy that they ended up, it seems like, getting the services that were appropriate for their kiddo and
Yeah,
that maybe they weren't getting.
for sure. All right. Those are this week's top stories in special education. If you would like to dive deeper into any of today's topics, be sure to check out the full newsletter. This week's Special Education Insight takes a closer look at manifestation determinations and what families should know when discipline and disability intersect.
And before you go, if you're finding these conversations helpful, please take a moment to follow the podcast on Spotify. Following the show helps us reach more families, educators, and advocates, and ensures you'll be notified whenever a new episode is released.
Thank you for spending part of your week with us. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay vocal, and take care of yourself.
Bye, everyone.